Have you ever lain awake at 3 a.m., replaying old conversations in your head, wondering, why can't I stop thinking? Why is my mind never at peace? The truth is, you're not an overthinker. You've simply never been taught how to think. No one ever handed you an instruction manual for the mind, so you ended up blaming yourself, when what you were truly missing was the skill to navigate the very brain you live with every day. Most of us grow up never being taught to think about our own thinking. Schools teach us what to think: numbers, formulas, theorems, historical facts. But they never teach us how to think, how to navigate the intricate world within our minds. As a result, when we step into life, we possess a supercomputer, the brain, yet no manual to operate it. This is what's known as the metacognitive gap, the space between having a thought and being able to observe, analyze, and adjust that thought. The average person has around 35,000 automatic thoughts each day, most of which are unconscious reflexes: worry, judgment, imagination, fear, memory. These programs run continuously in the background, creating feelings of fatigue, stress, and overthinking. In truth, you're not someone who thinks too much. You simply haven't learned to see thinking as a process that can be managed. Imagine standing in the middle of a crowded highway, each car representing a thought. Without metacognition, you're struck by every passing vehicle, negative emotions, old memories, vague fears. But when you train your metacognitive ability, you build an overpass, allowing yourself to watch the traffic of thoughts from above. You can't stop the traffic, but you change your position, from being caught within to becoming the observer. This isn't toxic positivity, but cognitive architecture, the foundation that helps you understand and navigate your mind as a system that can be reprogrammed. From here, we can apply the first tool: notice, name, navigate. Notice, pause, and recognize when you're drifting into a loop of thoughts. Self-awareness is the first step toward control. Name, label the kind of thinking that's occurring. I'm worrying, I'm self-criticizing, I'm replaying the past. Naming turns the abstract into the concrete, and what is concrete can be handled. Navigate. Once recognized, choose a conscious response. Slow your breathing, shift activities, write it down, or simply observe without intervening. When practiced regularly, you begin to see clearly that you are not your thoughts. You are the one who sees them. That is the moment you step out of the role of the mind's victim and become the one at the helm. The metacognitive gap is not a personal flaw. It is the byproduct of an education system that neglects the inner life. Society teaches us to conquer the outer world, but not to govern the world within. Yet the good news is this: the brain can always relearn. Once you understand how it works, overthinking ceases to be an illness and becomes an invitation to explore your own mind. When you sit still, doing nothing in particular, while showering, walking, or lying in bed before sleep, a certain network in your brain becomes highly active. Scientists call it the default mode network, DMN, the brain's screensaver mode, where endless streams of thought unfold, recalling the past, imagining the future, self-judgment, comparison, worry. The DMN gives humans the ability to be self-aware, to picture themselves in time and space, to imagine situations that haven't yet occurred. That's why it's also the birthplace of creativity and intuition, where sudden insights emerge when you're not trying. However, without understanding how this network operates, we easily become prisoners of it. Think of those moments when you're trying to relax, yet your mind begins to play a PowerPoint presentation of every mistake you've ever made. Or when you're out for a walk and your head keeps replaying a conversation from last week. That's your DMN running unchecked, like a browser that's opened 50 tabs at once. We're not really thinking too much, we're simply being swept away by the brain's default current. Interestingly, the DMN is not the enemy. It simply needs to be guided in the right way. When you learn to observe, you can fluidly shift between the two main modes of the brain: focused attention network, when you are concentrating, solving problems, reading, or working. Default mode network, when you allow the mind to drift freely, connecting ideas and recalling memories. Both are essential. The problem lies in imbalance. We spend too much time in the default mode without knowing how to turn it off when needed. To restore balance, the video introduces an incredibly useful tool, the 2-4-8 breathing technique. Inhale for 2 seconds. Hold for 4 seconds. Exhale for 8 seconds. Breathing out for twice as long as you breathe in activates the parasympathetic nervous system, helping the body and mind shift from stress to relaxation. This is not a shallow meditation hack, but a precise biological mechanism, a shortcut that allows you to switch neural networks like pressing Alt+Tab to change windows. With regular practice, you begin to notice the moment when the DMN activates. The inner voice begins to speak. Images of the past surface. Anxious feelings arise. Instead of being swept away, you simply pause, take a deep 2-4-8 breath, and return to the presence of this moment. We often expect the mind to know how to calm itself, as if expecting the body to instinctively perform a backflip. But in truth, peace is a skill, not an instinct. And that skill begins with recognizing when you are in default mode and knowing how to switch modes. Because once you master the default network, you are no longer a victim of memory and worry, but the captain of consciousness, moving intentionally between past, present, and future, rather than drifting helplessly in an endless stream of thought. The human brain is a marvelous yet finite system. Like a computer with limited RAM, your brain can only process a certain amount of information at once. When too many windows are open, worrying, deciding, remembering, calculating, you reach what's called cognitive load. That's why there are days when you feel your brain just stops working, even though nothing particularly serious has happened. Fatigue, lack of focus, irritability, or procrastination are not signs of weakness. They are neuroscience. When the brain exceeds its processing capacity, it begins to crash, just like a computer overloaded with heavy applications. And the crucial part is this. We often blame ourselves when in fact we simply lack a strategy for managing load. Think of Steve Jobs. He wore the same outfit every day. Many saw it as eccentricity, but it was actually wisdom. Jobs understood that every small decision consumes mental energy, a phenomenon called decision fatigue. By minimizing unnecessary choices, he preserved energy for what truly mattered. So how can we manage the brain's RAM? The video suggests 3 golden principles. 1. Chunking. Instead of handling each task separately, group them together. For example, check your emails, messages, and schedule during the same time block. This helps the brain switch contexts less frequently, reducing the energy wasted on tab switching. 2. Automation turn repetitive tasks into routines. When an action becomes automatic, the brain no longer needs to think each time you do it. For instance, prepare your clothes at night for the next morning, or have lunch at the same hour every day. Each stable habit is a background program that lightens the brain's load. 3. Implementation intentions. This is the art of programming the mind. If situation X occurs, I will take action Y. For example, if it's Sunday, I'll plan my week. If someone asks for an urgent decision, I'll say, "Let me think and get back to you." These simple rules help you respond systematically, rather than reconsidering from scratch every time. One of the paradoxes of our modern age is that we blame ourselves for exhaustion, while we are, in truth, running too many mental programs at once, working, checking the phone, wondering if we locked the door. The feeling of being overwhelmed is not your fault. It's a signal that your system needs optimization, not more effort. Just as you can't upgrade your brain's RAM, you can close unnecessary applications. Learn to reorganize your cognitive energy. Take screen-free breaks. Pre-plan recurring decisions. Limit multitasking. When you respect the limits of your mind, the brain responds with clarity, focus, and creativity. Managing cognitive load is not about slowing down life. It's about living more intelligently, using the right energy at the right time for what truly matters. One of the greatest mistakes of the modern human is trying to control thought. We're taught to think positively, to stop worrying, to banish negativity. Yet the more we try to push thoughts away, the stronger they return, like trying to hold a ball underwater. The deeper you press it, the faster and harder it bounces back. The truth is, you cannot stop the stream of thought, just as you cannot stop the waves of the sea. Thinking is the natural motion of the mind, a byproduct of having a living, active brain. What you can do is not to block the waves, but to learn how to surf them, to change your relationship with thought itself. We often identify ourselves with our thoughts. I am a failure. I am worthless. I am not enough. But thoughts are not truths. They are fleeting mental phenomena, like the weather of the mind. Today may bring a melancholic rain, tomorrow a joyful sun. You cannot control the weather, but you can choose how to meet it. Carry an umbrella, seek shelter, or simply watch it pass. The video introduces a powerful tool called cognitive diffusion, a technique from acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT. Instead of saying, I am a failure, try saying, I am having the thought that I am a failure. It may sound subtle, but this difference creates a cognitive distance. It separates you from the thought, helping you recognize that you are the observer, not the content of the mind. With regular practice, you begin to see clearly. Thoughts come and go, but the awareness that observes them remains, calm, steady, untouched. A practical example. When you feel anxious, instead of reacting, I have to stop worrying, simply note, here is the feeling of anxiety arising. Just acknowledge it, name it, and let it pass. No resistance, no analysis. Because the more you fight a thought, the more energy you feed it. This does not mean indifference or resignation. On the contrary, acceptance is the first step toward freedom. When you no longer battle with your own mind, you reclaim the energy to act according to your true values, instead of being swept into emotional loops. Remember, thoughts do not need to be believed, they only need to be noticed. Like music drifting from the neighbor's apartment, you hear it, but you don't have to dance to it. You can simply let it play and return to the present moment. Modern culture glorifies control, but real strength lies in observation and direction, not force. Holding on to thoughts is like holding your breath. You can't do it for long. Mental well-being doesn't come from stopping the waves, but from learning how to float, even while the waves remain. And when you truly understand this, something miraculous happens. You no longer fear your thoughts. They become visitors, not invaders. And when the mind no longer has to fight itself, peace arises naturally, unforced, effortless, serene. If the mind is a house, then attention is the light within it. Wherever you shine, that light becomes the center of your experience. The problem is, most of us have never learned to direct that light. It flickers restlessly from one thing to another, reflecting everything that passes by. And we call that distraction, anxiety, or overthinking. Attention is not a fixed beam of light, but a camera lens that can adjust its focus. You can zoom in to see details or zoom out to see the wider picture. However, most of us are stuck in one mode, usually zoomed too close on a problem, magnifying every negative detail until it fills the entire frame. When the mind is trapped in this state, even small matters feel overwhelming, and anxiety takes hold. The beautiful thing is that attention can be trained, like a muscle. We can learn to expand or narrow it as needed. The video suggests a simple yet powerful tool, the 5-4-3-2-1 technique, a gentle practice to bring you back to the present whenever the mind begins to drift. Practicing the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. When you notice yourself sinking into a stream of thoughts, pause and look at 5 things around you. Listen to 4 sounds that exist in your space. Feel 3 things you're physically touching: the temperature, the fabric of your clothes, the surface of your chair. Smell 2 scents that you can identify. Taste 1 flavor in your mouth, or simply notice the sensations of dryness, moisture, sweetness, or bitterness. When you do this, you're adjusting the lens of attention, shifting from the inner world, streams of thought and memory, to the outer world, the sensory experience of reality. It's a manual way of pulling the mind out of the spiral of imagination and returning it to the now. In an age overflowing with information, attention is the most precious resource. Every platform, advertisement, and app is competing for that light. When you don't control your own attention, someone else will. Training the architecture of attention not only reduces anxiety, but also restores ownership of your own mind. Another crucial aspect is attention flexibility. Just as the body needs stretching, the mind needs to train its ability to shift between narrow and broad focus. When writing, you need sharp concentration. When resting, you should expand your attention to the surrounding environment so your brain can recover. Those who don't know how to adjust their focus burn out mentally faster. Interestingly, we've invented countless focus modes for our phones: Do Not Disturb, Focus Mode, Zen Mode. Yet we've never learned how to create a focus mode for ourselves. Your brain has such a switch, too. It's just not in your settings. It lies in your awareness of where you direct your attention. So practice adjusting it every day. When you eat, just eat. When you walk, just walk. When you think, just think. When you master the direction of your inner light, the world within becomes quieter. Not because everything disappears, but because you've learned to see it with intention. People often say, "I'm fine," or "I'm tired," as if there are only a few labels to describe the vast inner world. But in truth, your emotions are far more complex and multi-layered. Every state of mind carries its own shade, and your ability to recognize those shades determines your emotional well-being. Science calls this emotional granularity, the fineness of your emotional distinctions. Imagine emotions as a color palette. Someone with low granularity only sees red, blue, yellow, sad, angry, happy. But someone with high granularity can perceive hundreds of shades: crimson, maroon, rose, rust. Likewise, they can sense the differences between anxiety, tension, confusion, anticipation, and fear. When you name an emotion precisely, you transform it from a vague feeling into data your mind can process. For example, if you simply say, "I'm sad," your brain doesn't know what to do with that information. But if you identify, "I'm disappointed because the result wasn't what I hoped for," suddenly the mind can act. Review expectations, adjust plans, or rest. That's why people with refined emotional awareness are less prone to depression and anxiety and tend to recover more quickly from pain. A simple way to build this skill is to expand your emotional vocabulary, just as you would when learning a new language. Try replacing angry with annoyed, frustrated, indignant, wronged, hurt. Replace sad with disappointed, lonely, empty, regretful, nostalgic, compassionate. Each word carries a different tone, and within that distinction, you begin to understand yourself more deeply. Psychologists call this emotional labeling, the act of naming emotions. When you do, the amygdala, which processes emotion, reduces its activity, while the prefrontal cortex, responsible for reason and control, becomes more active. In other words, simply speaking or writing your feelings makes your brain calmer and clearer. Emotional granularity not only helps you regulate yourself, but also deepens the quality of your relationships. When you have the language to describe how you feel, you communicate with honesty and subtlety. "I'm not angry with you, I just feel overlooked." A single sentence like that can prevent an entire argument. It's fascinating that modern society has hundreds of words for coffee: latte, macchiato, cappuccino, americano, but only a handful for emotions. We can distinguish the bitterness and sweetness of a drink, yet fail to tell the difference between the sour and spicy flavors of the soul. That's why many people feel chaotic inside without truly knowing what they're feeling. Learning to recognize emotion isn't weakness, it's psychological precision. When you clearly understand what you feel, you're no longer ruled by your emotions. You become the one steering the ship, not a passenger on the train of moods. And the most beautiful thing is this: each time you name an emotion accurately, you are rewriting the language of your soul, word by word, breath by breath. Most of us have made promises to ourselves. Starting tomorrow, I'll exercise. I'll stop scrolling before bed. I'll manage my emotions better. But in reality, only a small fraction of those intentions ever come true. Not because we lack willpower, but because our intentions are too vague. The brain doesn't understand what "I'll try" means. It needs clear instructions. This is where implementation intentions, the if-then plans, come in. It's a psychological technique proven to double your likelihood of achieving a goal. Its structure is simple. If situation X occurs, then I will do action Y. It may seem small, but its power lies in clarity and conditionality. When you think or write in the if-then format, you're reprogramming your brain's automatic system. Instead of deciding in the heat of the moment, when energy, emotion, and willpower fluctuate, you decide beforehand while your mind is calm. Examples: if it's 9 p.m., I'll leave my phone in the living room and go to bed. If I start to feel anxious, I'll breathe 2-4-8 3 times. If someone asks for an instant decision, I'll say, "Let me review and get back to you." These small rules may seem insignificant, but they lighten cognitive load, reduce errors, and create healthy automatic responses. Like writing code for your mind, you no longer wrestle internally every time a situation repeats itself. Why it works? Because the brain loves patterns. It wants to know what comes next. When you create if-then statements, you give the brain shortcuts, ready-made neural pathways, so it can respond automatically without consuming willpower, a resource that depletes quickly. Psychologist Peter Gollwitzer, who developed this concept, found that people who practice implementation intentions achieve their goals twice as often as those who only set vague intentions. Another key element is the specificity of the trigger. "If I feel stressed" is too vague. But "if I notice my shoulders and neck tightening while working" is concrete and recognizable. The more specific the cue, the easier the behavior becomes automatic. This technique applies not only to habits, but also to emotional regulation and communication. Examples: if I sense the other person is angry, I'll take a deep breath and stay silent for 5 seconds before responding. If I catch myself procrastinating, I'll write down the specific reason on paper. Small behaviors like these, repeated over time, build a foundation of soft discipline, stability without force. The subtle power. The miracle is that every if-then plan acts like a mental shortcut, helping you respond wisely even when emotions run high. You no longer struggle against yourself because you've already prepared a map for the moment. The mind loves predictability. And implementation intentions are the language it understands best, a small but powerful map that guides you through emotional storms, step by step, steady and aware. From childhood, we've been taught that learning means absorbing information, reading, listening, memorizing. But neuroscience has shown that we don't learn by absorbing, we learn by retrieving. Knowledge isn't strengthened when we read it, but when we recall it from memory. This is called the testing effect, one of the most important discoveries about how the brain learns and changes. Research from Purdue University shows that self-testing helps you remember 3 times better than rereading. When you try to recall something, your brain must activate the neural network associated with it, and with each activation, that pathway grows stronger. It's like training a muscle. Growth happens not when you consume protein, but when you use it. What's fascinating is that this effect doesn't just apply to learning facts. It also strengthens mental training itself. The same principle applies to practices from earlier chapters, like metacognition, breathing, 248, and implementation intentions. Every time you recall and reapply these tools, you reinforce the neural circuits that sustain awareness, focus, and emotional balance. Instead of merely knowing the theory, you need to test yourself. What am I thinking right now? Check your metacognition. Is my default network active? Check your attention. What tool can I apply in this very moment? Check your cognitive reflex. And these questions act as little quizzes for the mind, forcing you to retrieve a skill instead of merely remembering a concept. And in that very moment of effortful recall, you strengthen the neural pathway, turning knowledge into reflex. Imagine learning to drive a car. At first, you study theory, the gas, the brakes, the mirrors, the signals. But only when you hold the wheel yourself does the brain begin forming motor networks. And after dozens of attempts, driving becomes natural. Likewise, only when you check your own thoughts and tools in real life does mastering the mind become instinct. The video introduces a fascinating method, micro-tests. Set a few random bells during your day, for instance, phone reminders. Each time one rings, pause and ask yourself, which tool do I need right now? It might be breathing 248 or practicing 5-4-3-2-1 or simply naming an emotion. Each time you do this, you're calling the lesson back for your brain, not to score points, but to carve a mental pathway, a route the mind will automatically take in moments of stress or loss of control. We constantly test everything, Wi-Fi speed, battery life, coffee quality, but rarely do we test our own mind. That's why so many people know countless self-development tools, yet so few truly change. They read, they understand, but they never retrieve. The power of the testing effect lies precisely here. It transforms theory into lived experience. Each time you ask, recall, or apply, you're not just learning, you're training your brain to build a new reflex. So let life be your gentle examination hall. Don't fear failing the test, for each time you forget and remember again, you're building another bridge in your brain. A bridge from knowledge to capability, from consciousness to subconsciousness. And when those bridges are strong enough, you won't just know how to be calm. You will become that calmness. Imagine your brain as an orchestra. Every tool you've learned so far, metacognition, attention control, implementation intentions, emotional granularity, is a distinct instrument. When played alone, each has value. But when you learn to coordinate them, they cease to be individual notes and become a mental symphony, harmonious, fluid, and powerful. In earlier chapters, each tool seemed to operate separately, observing thoughts, adjusting breath, labeling emotions, creating if-then patterns. But life isn't compartmentalized. When you're caught in the current of overthinking, no single technique is enough. The key is the fluid integration of these skills, the art of moving between them effortlessly. For example, imagine you feel anxious before a presentation. Metacognition helps you notice, I'm being pulled into thoughts of fear and judgment. And emotional granularity refines that awareness. This is anticipatory anxiety, fear of what hasn't happened yet. Implementation intention activates. If I feel tense, then I'll breathe 2-4-8 3 times and review one bullet from my opening. And attention control anchors you. I feel my hands, my breath, the room around me. Within 30 seconds, you've engaged 4 tools simultaneously. The result, your mind shifts from reactivity to command. This is the integrated symphony the video describes, where skills don't merely add up, they amplify one another. Neuroscience calls this neural synergy, the resonance between brain regions when multiple cognitive skills operate together. When this happens, the brain creates cross-connections between networks, allowing for faster, more stable responses. In other words, you're not just using tools, you're building a new neural architecture, a refined control system for emotion, thought, and action working as one. The more you practice, the more automatic these processes become. Just as a musician no longer needs to look at the notes, you too begin to adjust your mind effortlessly. Calm, focus, and clarity are no longer goals. They become the background music of your life. And here's the miracle. The brain continues to reinforce these connections even while you sleep. During deep sleep, it reorganizes memories and transfers skills from consciousness to the subconscious. Meaning, if you practice consistently, your brain keeps training itself while you rest. The integrated symphony is where every single note, thought, breath, emotion, and reflex blends into one coherent composition of awareness. In that moment, you no longer struggle against the mind, you begin to collaborate with it. And it is precisely in that realization you understand peace doesn't come from silencing every sound in your head, but from learning to orchestrate them into harmony. After all the chapters you've walked through, you may now see something beautifully simple yet profound. You were never an overthinker. You were simply untrained in the art of mind navigation. And the good news is you can learn it, beginning right now. Your mind is not broken. It's just running on an old operating system, one programmed long before anyone taught you how to manage thoughts, emotions, and attention. Now, you hold the upgrade in your hands, a toolkit for self-mastery, metacognition, attention control, cognitive load management, emotional granularity, and implementation intentions. But the essence is not in knowing these tools. It lies in small, consistent practice day after day. When you notice yourself slipping into negative thought, that's the moment to notice. Name. Navigate. When the mind begins to wander, breathe 2-4-8 and return to the present. When you feel overwhelmed by too many tasks, pause, close a few tabs in your mind, and choose what truly matters. When emotions surge, name them, define them precisely, and watch their power fade. Each act may seem small, but the strength of transformation lies in repetition. Like a drop of water shaping stone, these micro-adjustments gradually restructure your neural pathways. This is how you reshape yourself from within, not through bursts of motivation or mental revolutions, but through steady, quiet persistence. The key is not to let perfectionism interrupt the process. When you think, "I need to change everything," overthinking has simply returned in disguise. Instead, begin with one tool. For example, practice notice, name, navigate for a week. Once it becomes natural, add another. True change isn't about doing everything at once. It's about doing one thing long enough for it to become who you are. Remember, thoughts are weather, not climate. The storms in your mind don't define you. Cognitive load is real. When you're tired, rest. When you're overloaded, slow down. Attention is adjustable. You hold the camera, don't let anyone else direct the lens. Emotions need language. The more precisely you name them, the more control you gain. Testing beats memorizing. Every time you ask, "What am I thinking right now?" you're strengthening your brain. You are no longer being dragged by the mind. Now you are the driver, the architect of your inner experience. Change doesn't happen in a single day, but day by day, you are rewriting the source code of your mind. And one day, as you lie awake in the quiet of night, instead of replaying old memories, you'll smile, knowing that your mind is still running, but this time, it's moving in the direction you chose.